All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about Israel going through one of its biggest fears, and that is a massive brain drain. Israel is terrified of its more educated citizens fleeing the country, and that's exactly what is happening right now. And these educated people are leaving because, well, they're terrified of dying in a war. Last year, Iran bombed Israel. This year, Iran also bombed Israel. And last year, 80,000 Israelis fled Israel. 80,000 Israelis fled Israel. And who were these Israelis? Were these Third Temple cultists? Were these fanatics? Were these settlers? No, these were the more educated Israelis. These were your tech specialists, your doctors. These were your more affluent citizens of Israel. And they fled, and this trend is continuing on. This trend began in the summer of 2023 because of Israel's turbulent political situation, because Netanyahu and his gang wanted to do a political overhaul. They wanted to do a judicial overhaul and render Israel's Supreme Court effectively useless and powerless, and they wanted to give ultimate power to the Knesset, or the Israeli parliament. So this caused a massive amount of rage amongst the Israeli population against the Netanyahu government. And so during this turbulent time in Israeli politics, a lot of Israelis started to flee Israel and go to different countries. And then last year in 2024, you had the very brief war between Israel and Iran actually bombed Israel. So 80,000 Israelis fled Israel. And this year, Israel got bombed even more severely by Iran than last year. And so the trend is continuing on. And Israel is going through one of its biggest fears. How do I know this? How do I know that this is one of Israel's biggest fears? Well, back in 2010, there was a journalist by the name of Jeffrey Goldberg who wrote an article, and he talked about how he had this conversation with this former Israeli general by the name of Ephraim Sneh. And Ephraim Sneh said that one of his biggest concerns was Israel going through a massive brain drain in which Israel's more educated people would flee Israel in fear of going through a nuclear war with Iran. And so this is one of Israel's biggest fears, and it is happening. In the midst of all this, you have the rise of Israel's biggest existential threat, Turkey, and the United States, which is supposed to be Israel's biggest ally under an administration led by Donald Trump, who was being praised as America's most pro-Israel president, is telling Turkey to rise up, is enabling Turkey to rise up. Donald Trump congratulated Erdogan and told him, "Congratulations, Erdogan, you did what no one else could do. You took over Syria."
Well, I think President Erdogan is the one responsible for Syria, for the successful fight in ridding Syria of its past leader. And I think this man is responsible. He doesn't take the responsibility, but it's actually a great achievement. They've been trying to do it for 2,000 years. I said, he does it. He did it. I mean, they're your surrogates. I think you should take the credit for it. I told him, take the credit. For 2,000 years, you've been trying to take over Syria. He took over Syria, and he doesn't want to take the credit. You know, all of those people are his surrogates.
And so the United States has enabled Turkey to take over Syria, which is right next to Israel's eastern border. And right now you have people in the United States government who want Turkey to deploy troops into Gaza in the name of peacekeeping. And if that happens, it would mean Israel being completely encircled, because currently you have Turkish soldiers in Lebanon, which lies on the north of Israel, and then you have Turkish soldiers in Cyprus, which lies on the west of Israel, and you have Turkish soldiers in Syria, which lies on the east of Israel. And so if Turkish soldiers are allowed to be deployed into Gaza, it would mean Turkish soldiers right across Israel's southern border. It would mean Israel being completely encircled. And so this is the reason why when the Israelis hear about Turkish troops being allowed to be deployed into Gaza, that is their biggest fear when it comes to this whole peacekeeping mission that is being discussed, this whole peacekeeping mission in Gaza that's currently being discussed. They'll hear about Emirati troops possibly being sent into Gaza. They'll hear about Egyptian soldiers, and that really doesn't worry the Israelis. But when they hear about Turkish soldiers, believe me, they start hearing those Ottoman mizmars playing in their heads. They are absolutely terrified. And if you don't believe me, just look into the Nudgel Committee's report on the rise of Turkey. The Nudgel Committee was established by the Israeli government in order to write up reports regarding Israel's national security and security budget, etc. And the Nudgel Committee stated that Turkey is a bigger threat than Iran. So they're talking about Iran, and they're talking about Iran's nuclear project, but really, Israel's biggest fear is the rise of Turkey. When it comes to facing other countries, Israel's biggest fear is Turkey. Because Turkey is very antagonistic towards Israel. Virtually the entire Turkish population is against Israel. They hate Israel. They want to go to war against Israel. They've made this very clear. You can read up on this, how Turkish people feel about the state of Israel. They really, really despise Israel. Right now, Turkey is not doing anything against Israel, but keep in mind, because of the fact that virtually all of the Turkish population, virtually all of Turkish society despises Israel, eventually that is going to be reflected in the policy of the Turkish government when it comes to Israel. That stuff can't just be suppressed. That whole phenomenon cannot be just ignored. When you have an entire population that hates another country to the point where they wouldn't mind destroying that other country, eventually, that sentiment is going to be translated into foreign policy. So Israel is facing this Turkish Leviathan, but really what makes this worse is the fact that the United States, which is supposed to be Israel's biggest ally, is rooting for Turkey and egging Turkey on and encouraging Turkey to rise. They want Turkey to rise because they want to use Turkey as a check against the Russians in the Middle East, in the Caucasus, in the South Caucasus, and also in the Black Sea. Russia is in the Black Sea. Russia is also in the Caucasus. Russia is also in the Middle East. Russia has a naval base in Syria. And they want to make sure that Turkey will be powerful enough so that NATO can use Turkey against the Russians. They don't have that with Israel. They're not going to use Israel against Russia. So regardless of Israel's fears of Turkey, NATO is still going to enable the rise of Turkey as it has been doing recently within recent years. Really going all the way, this has been going on for a long time, but you can go as far back as the beginning of the Syrian war and read reports about how the United States and Great Britain and France wanted to topple Bashar al-Assad, and they talked about Turkey having a massive presence in Syria. And so that plan, that policy is coming to fruition. It's actually manifesting right before our eyes. It's quite surreal to see this. And so Israel is facing all of these existential problems, really. It's seeing its more affluent demographic fleeing its borders and going to America and going to Europe, which means you're going to have less educated people. You're also going to have less moderate people, less politically moderate people. And with these people leaving, they're going to leave a political space with a vacuum. Who's going to fill up that political space left by the more affluent Israelis? It's going to be the fanatics. Who's having most of the kids in Israel? It is not the more educated. The more educated people are either members of Sodom, or if they are having children, they're having less children than the more fanatical, the more nationalistic, the more religious Israelis. The people who are having most of the children in Israel are not the Arabs, contrary to what some may assume. The people who are having most of the kids in Israel are the ultra-religious and the ultra-nationalistic, the fanatics. They're having most of the kids. They are beating defeating the moderates in the demographic war, in the birth rate war. And so the future belongs to fanaticism in Israel. That is the bottom line. The future of Israel does not belong to the political moderates. It belongs to the politically fanatic people. They are the future of Israel because they are having most of the children. The people who want to build a third temple on the Temple Mount are having more kids than the people in Israel who are politically moderate. The people who want a third temple and who want to genocide all of the Arabs in Gaza, the West Bank, and also the Arabs who are living within Israel are having more kids than the people who read Haaretz or they read Plus 972 and they think that what's been going on in Gaza is a crime, and they're right. So this is the reality of Israel. The reality of Israel is that fanaticism is the future of that country. Racism is the future. Racism is already prevalent there, but it's only going to get worse. And once these people take enough power, they're going to do something much worse than what we saw in Gaza recently. Now, every time I say there's going to be a massive genocide of the Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza, and the Arabs in Israel proper, I always have these people who come on and they say, "What do you mean? What do you call Gaza? It's already been going on." Yes, it's already been going on. You're correct. Genocides don't just happen in one piecemeal window of time. They just don't happen in one single duration of time. Genocides are usually done in steps, and they are usually done in increments within time. So they'll kill a whole huge number of people in this 1 year, then they'll wait, then they'll kill more people. So what happened in Gaza was really a step towards a greater, more massive genocide that is going to happen in the future. The Israeli historian Benny Morris, he wrote an article about this sometime, I want to say last year, on Haaretz. Great article, I will say, even though I think Benny Morris is really just, I know that Benny Morris is an apologist for the Israeli government. He will have positions that are true and make sense. And so he wrote this article basically saying that there's going to be a massive Holocaust of the Arabs. And he says that there is a very good chance that we will see concentration camps being built by the Israelis. Actual concentration camps, and they're going to work to genocide the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. And it's going to be much worse than what we saw and what we have been seeing in Gaza. And this is going to be done by a fanatical generation in Israel. This type of genocide, this genocide is going to be done by people who want a third temple. They want to see not Sharia law, they want to see co-Sharia law. They want to establish a purely Jewish state, and they don't want Muslims, they don't want Arabs, they don't want Christians to be in Israel. And Israel's anti-Christian, anti-Christ spirit is becoming more and more clear, more and more open and obvious as time goes on. Look at what happened this past Easter. The Israeli government used to allow tens of thousands of Palestinians to travel from the West Bank to Jerusalem to celebrate Easter. And look at what the Israeli government did this last Easter. They limited the number of Palestinians who could enter Jerusalem from the West Bank, and there were only several thousand Palestinians as opposed to tens of thousands of Palestinians celebrating Easter. And so they're making their anti-Christian, anti-Christ sentiment more and more obvious, more and more conspicuous as time goes on. This fanaticism is only going to grow. Israel is like a man who is possessed by a demon, and that demon leaves and comes back with 7 more. Israel is going to become more and more diabolical as time transpires. I took this parable from Jesus. Jesus said to the generation that he lived with, he said, this generation is like a man who was possessed by one demon. The demon leaves and comes back with 7 more. And so the man is now even more diabolical, more evil, more sinister, more possessed. And so that generation became more and more evil. They crucified Christ and they passed that threshold and they entered the realm of total and utter depravity and evil and reprobateness. And then what happened? 40 years after the crucifixion, the Jews were killing one another. And why were they killing one another? It was in the middle of the Roman-Judean War. If you don't understand this history, I highly encourage you to read the book by Josephus on the Roman-Judean War. I believe it's usually abbreviated as just war, but I think it's also called the War Between the Romans and the Jews, or the Roman-Judean War by Josephus. There's only one book like it, so it's very easy. It's very easy to find. You can find it online, but you can also buy just the compiled works of Josephus on Amazon for a very cheap price. And so Josephus, he recounts this entire history in his book on the Roman-Judean War. And he talks about how the Jews were butchering each other. Now, why were they killing each other? They were killing each other over who was going to control the temple. And you had the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were bad, don't get me wrong, I don't like them, but they were a little bit more level-headed than the fanatic faction. The fanatic faction called itself the Zealots because they were the most zealous observers of the law, so they said. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those types of Jews, they were more willing to just really surrender to the Romans because they knew that it was a losing battle. They knew they were going to lose. And they said, listen, better than just getting slaughtered by the Romans, let's just surrender and just be done with this whole thing. This was crazy. It was a bad idea to revolt against the Romans. Let's just end this. And the Zealots said no. Now, the thing is that the Sadducees, they dominated the temple. They controlled the temple. The Zealots wanted to control the temple. So what the Zealots did was they sent a letter to the Arab Jews who were living in the land that we today call Jordan. They sent a letter, and in this letter, they said that the temple is right now under the control of traitorous Jews who are going to give the temple over to the hands of pagan Romans. And the Arab Jews got the letter, and they said, oh, we cannot allow this to happen. Now, these were the Arab Jews. And I'm gonna guess that a lot of their descendants ended up being converted into Islam. So they went from being fanatics for the temple to being fanatics for the Kaaba. Just a very interesting phenomenon of history there. But the Arab Jews, by the numerous thousands, rode on horseback to Jerusalem. And they went through the city gates and they went into the temple and they proceeded to make the temple into a literal bloodbath. Josephus says that they killed so many thousands upon thousands of people inside the temple that you could see the steps toward the temple just being puddled with human blood and gore and carnage. The Arab Jews butchered thousands upon thousands of their fellow Jews because they believed that those Jews were traitors and that they were going to give the temple over to pagan foreigners, in this case, the Romans. Now, there is a parallel between that event and what is happening right now. Right now, you have this battle between the fanatics and the moderates over who's going to control the Temple Mount. They don't have a temple, but they have a Temple Mount. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it sure as hell does rhyme. And so the status quo in the Israeli society is that the Temple Mount basically belongs to the Muslims. They have several mosques on the Temple Mount, the biggest one being the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the status quo is that the Waqf, or the Muslim Council, which is headquartered in Jordan, technically governs the Temple Mount. The Israeli government pretty much dominates the Temple Mount because it decides what happens. And the status quo is that the Muslims are the only ones who are allowed to have religious edifices on the Temple Mount. The Jews are not allowed to have a synagogue on the Temple Mount. The fanatics are saying, oh my goodness, these Jews are traitors because they are allowing the Temple Mount, which belongs to us, it was given to us by God, they are allowing the Temple Mount to be controlled by foreigners. In this case, it's the Muslims, it's the Arabs, etc. And they hate that.
And really, the stuff that that Yariv says it's really fancy cowardice. That's all it is. Fancy sounding cowardice. It's like we shouldn't be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. We should succumb to the rules of the jihad on the Temple Mount, the holiest place for Jewish people. He calls it a provocation. This is where we're from. This is the heart of the
It's not provocation. And you know what? You are thinking only about yourself, because you know that for your action there is reaction, and you don't care for the Israeli security. You don't care for the rest of the Israeli people. You only care for yourself. And people that are saying, I'm allowed to do whatever I want, these are the people that are making troubles. I don't know any Israeli textbook that you don't have the West Bank part of Israel. Let's go to Israeli school.
It's our land.
Okay, so you see, it's the mirror. It's mirror.
Right.
You're talking about the extremists, but you're the same. And I'm saying you cannot
just said it yourself.
demand from the Palestinians.
You said it yourself.
You cannot demand from the Palestinian to show the map with Israel and Palestine when you are not ready to do it. Once you will do it, you will see the change in the Palestinian as well. But the Palestinian.
They want to destroy Israel.
Let's talk.
You don't want to show that. You just want to hide that and talk about peace. Nobody's talking peace.
You are trying very cleverly. You are trying to avoid reality.
This is my land.
The reality.
This is my Temple
just
Mount.
a second.
And I know my security. And I know who the bad guys are. And most people in Israel know that you are not part of the consensus.
The reality
most people in Israel know that two-state solution is not happening. Most people in Israel know that Jews should have rights to pray.
We will see what will happen. But reality is that your neighbors, the Palestinians, they have no citizen rights. They are not citizens of Israel. You are occupying them. You don't care for democracy. You don't care for equality. You don't care for rights. This is the difference between us. You believe in Israel as a Jewish state, and I believe in Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. I'm the real Zionist. You are post-Zionist.
Hamas is for an Islamic state.
Don't talk about the Hamas. I'm talking about me.
Because you don't want to see who the enemies are. You don't want to see.
I want to look at myself first of all. And you are in favor of the occupation. Say it out loud. And once you will say it and you will do it, you make the Hamas stronger.
So, just like the Zealot faction in the Roman Judean War butchered the other Jews because those Jews were more willing to give up the temple to the Romans. Today, you have these fanatic Jews who want to take the Temple Mount away from the moderate status quo. And in their minds, the Jews who want to maintain the status quo are traitors, just like the Zealots saw the Jews who wanted to just not fight the Romans anymore as traitors. And so if these fanatics get enough power, they will eventually not only butcher the Palestinians and the Arabs who live in Israel, but they will butcher their fellow Jew in the name of protecting Eretz Israel, protecting the land of Israel, but also in the name of retaking the Temple Mount from foreigners, from non-believers, non-Jews, and in the name of having the right to build the third temple. And if you look at the Ben Gavirs of Israel, they want a third temple. Ben Gavir wants a third temple. Bezalel Smotrich wants a third temple. He talks about the Beit HaMikdash.
אנחנו בתשעה באב, הר הבית, האם לציין כאן את חורבן בית המקדש. אני צריך גם להגיד ביושר, יש התקדמות מאוד מאוד גדולה כאן במשילות, בריבונות, תמונות של יהודים שמתפללים.
They want a third temple. So as the influence of the political moderates in Israel declines, as it declines due to the fact that the fanatics are having more children, as it declines due to the fact that a lot of these people are fleeing Israel, the fanatics are going to gain more influence and power, and they're going to take more and more political battleground, and they're going to take more space, and thus they're going to be more and more in a position to dictate the political landscape of Israel. And once they get enough power, they will go against they will go full throttle in their desire to slaughter and purge out the non-Jews, the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Christians, the Muslims, and they will go against violently. They will go against their fellow Jews. And so Israel is facing multiple existential problems. We have the more intelligent, more educated people fleeing Israel. On top of that, you have the fanatics growing in power, rising in power. On top of that, you have Turkey being allowed to rise by Israel's biggest ally. And Turkey is right now Israel's biggest existential threat. And so if the biggest ally for Israel is enabling the rise and the empowerment of Israel's biggest existential threat, does Israel really have America as its ultimate ally? I have to call that whole narrative into question. And then on top of all this, you have the revival of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is now fashionable. I know this because every damn time since last year, or you could even say since 2023, or since 2022, but really within recent years, every single time I have uploaded a video warning people about the rise of Nazism, I get almost entirely negative comments. And in fact, I lose subscribers. People unsubscribe from me when I make videos warning people about the revival of Nazism. And I don't care. I want those people to unsubscribe from me. In fact, if you're a Nazi and you hate what I have to say, please unsubscribe. I want you to unsubscribe. I don't want Nazis being amongst my subscribers. And so this really goes to show that anti-Semitism is reviving. You go on to X, you go on to Twitter, you go on to Instagram, you go to Facebook. What is the dominating opinion when it comes to Israel? It is one of hatred and antagonism. And this has a lot to do with Israel's slaughterhouse in Gaza. But keep in mind, just to make an historical parallel, the anti-Semitism that empowered Adolf Hitler also rose up due to a great extent to the violence that was being done by the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks, well, many of them just so happened to be Jewish. And so people used that. I'm not saying it was right, but people used that back at that time, back in the 20th century, to justify anti-Semitism. That's just an historical fact. I'm not justifying it. I'm simply making an observation. So don't strike me, YouTube. And so we're seeing this revival in anti-Semitism, which means that more and more people, even in Western countries, don't want to see Israeli Jews in their countries. In fact, you have videos, and I've seen a lot of these types of videos where people are walking up to Israelis in other countries and yelling at them and screaming all sorts of abuse at them.
Question for my TikTok, buddy. No, buddy, we need a quick question, buddy. What's your stance on Israel, buddy? What's your stance on Israel?
Israel is the best country.
Fuck Israel.
No.
Fuck everything about Israel, buddy. Free Palestine, buddy. Look how I smelled you. I smelled a rat. I smelled IDF Israelis. You could smell them. They smell like shit.
And in fact, in Cyprus, there is a lot of people in Cyprus who say, we don't want Israelis in our country. And you will see signs in Cyprus saying, no Israelis. We don't want Israelis here.
You're gonna touch me? You're gonna touch me?
Yeah, I'm gonna fucking touch you.
He's
Get
touching
the
me.
fuck out of here.
He's
Get
touching
the
me.
fuck out of
He's
here.
touching me.
Fuck off.
Touch me.
Fuck off, Zionist. Fuck off. You are not welcome here.
You are all on
You are
picture.
not welcome here.
You are all on picture.
You are not fucking welcome here.
You are
You
all
are
on picture.
not welcome here.
You are all on picture.
I don't give a fuck about your
Everything.
pictures. You are not welcome
Look at
here.
you.
Fuck off,
You're a
Zionist.
terrorist.
Palestina libera. Palestina libera.
Ciao, come
Qui non è Gaza, non è Gaza qui. Qui non è Gaza. Qui siamo in Italia. Siamo a Milano. Assassini. Assassini.
Voilà l'Italie. Voilà l'Italie.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Andate a casa vostra! Andate a casa vostra, assassini! Assassini!
Free Palestine! If you are Zionist who support the killing and the starvation of children, no, get the fuck out of Hong Kong.
Can you tell about your experience with Israeli tourists?
They pushed me to the ground, they spit at me, they pulled my flag from the flagpole. They did all kinds of disgusting things. I wish Hong Kong government really look at who's coming in. If they had killed people, if they are a member of IDF, really, as a citizen, I don't want them to be here.
And it's almost like something you would see in the 20th century where people would say no blacks or no Irish or no Italians or no Jews. It's this revival in 20th century style racism and 20th century anti-Semitism. And I know a lot of you say this is great. A lot of you say this is a great thing. This is wonderful. No, it's not. No, it's not. You may not like Israel, and that's totally fine. I'm very critical of Israel. I think we should all be critical of Israel for the evils that it did in Gaza and the evils it's still doing in Gaza. I have no issue. I want people to be critical of Israel. But what I don't want is for people to go down the road of being a Hitler fanboy and loving the Austrian painter. That's what I don't want to see. Because if you do that, guess what? You become what you claim to be against. You claim to be against the Israelis because the Israeli government is genocidal. But if you embrace the Austrian painter, then you have become exactly what you claim to be against. Because at that point, you would be embracing a genocidal ideology, and you would be praising and revering a genocidal regime, the Third Reich. The reason why I'm against Israel is the same reason why I'm against Nazism, because I hate racism and I hate eugenics and I hate genocidal ideology. It's really, really quite surreal the times that we're living in. It's like we are returning back to the 20th century. And so Israel is facing all these existential crises. The rise of Turkey, the fact that its biggest ally is supporting the rise of Turkey, the massive brain drain that Israel is currently going through, and then on top of that, you have the phenomenon of global anti-Semitism, which means that Israelis are going to have less and less places to hide in, and it's going to come to a point where Israelis will have no place to hide in, and it's going to be very, very bad. And it's going to be a repeat of history. It's going to be a repeat of what happened in the 1940s to the Jewish people. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I hate it, but I'm making an observation for the future based on my understanding of history. History does rhyme, and we are going through the rhyming of the symphony of history, so to speak. It's very, very surreal, the times that we are living in. And it's not looking good for Israel. It's not looking good for Israel at all. At all. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on that. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.